are.
Oh,
We're live. All right. Welcome everyone to Senate Education this Friday, February 2nd at 1 p.m. We're so pleased to have Charity Clark, Vermont's Attorney General, with us to talk a little bit about S284, an act relating to the use of electronic devices and digital and online products in schools. Committee's had a walkthrough of the bill, and this is really our first day jumping in and doing taking some testimony. But as I said to the Attorney General earlier, this is also the first time, who knows, it'll be the last time. We don't usually have the Attorney General in this in the Education Committee. So we thought it'd be just nice for you to say hello, tell us a little bit about your work, a little background, and then talk to us a little bit about what your agency is seeing in general on the technology front.
okay,
That'd be great.
awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so pleased to be here. I
And you know everyone here? Let's just go around. We'll start with gentleman right here.
And Senator Terry Williams from Rutland District. Dave Weeks, Rutland District.
Campion Bennington,
Martine Oracular, Chittenden Central.
and usually we have Senator Hashim here.
Okay. Yes. So I will begin by saying that I am a product of Vermont's excellent education system. And
Bennington County.
although I went to preschool. You might not have done, where's Weston? It's a little small Weston. I don't think that's in Bennington County. That's Windsor.
Yeah.
Yes.
Windsor? Okay. Alas, but I also, fun fact, before I went to law school, I worked in the governor's office and I was the education policy analyst. So Act 60 was the day, standardized testing, and it's all a long ago blur, but I note that to say that I have a particularized passion for education. I'm also a mother and an aunt.
And Burn Academy.
Burn Academy is where I went to high school. I also went to elementary school in Ludlow. And then in Manchester. I moved to Manchester when I was 8. So I feel really passionately about our excellent education system and our wonderful teachers. But it really crystallized when I worked in the governor's office, because I just arrived at UVM with my great education. I realized how lucky I was. And then when I started learning about education systems in other states and how strong our system is, despite the fact that usually there's a correlation between income and a strong education system, and our income is like average, but the education system competes with all of the wealthier states because it's so great. So we're so fortunate, and I'm bragging about it to you, and you already know because I can't help myself. But let me tell you a little bit about our office, in case you don't interface too often with us. So I like to say we are the lawyer to the state, and we have 150-ish employees, roughly 100 are attorneys. And we do all sorts of things. We defend the state when the state is sued. We prosecute crimes. We also prosecute civil cases that are environmental or consumer related, which is one of the reasons why I'm here in the consumer context. And we also provide legal advice to our client agencies in AHS, in the tax department, education, kind of all over the place. And that's roughly what we do. We also operate with UVM, the Consumer Assistance Program. I always flag that for legislators, because if you ever have a constituent who has a problem, it's a consumer problem, of course, we're there. But also, if they have a problem and you don't know the answer, I swear the Consumer Assistance Program will know. I'm constantly very impressed with their depth of knowledge on how state government works, federal government, municipal government. So if you ever have a problem and you need some help, just call CAP 1-800-649-2424, and they can probably send you in the right direction or help you out. So that's a brief overview of the office. And I'm here on this bill for 2 reasons, really largely related to our expertise in the social media context due to a lawsuit we filed, but also with regards to data privacy, which is another passion of mine, if you will. So I wanted to just touch on a couple of those items and say that let me begin by saying that we are supportive of the work on this bill and this bill generally. Some of the details I'm not sure I would have in there, or maybe they would look the same way. And as the bill gets farther along, I can maybe provide more specific feedback, but just wanted to show my general support for the bill. And a lot of that comes from the information that we have gathered and understood as a result of our investigation into Meta. and our eventual lawsuits filed against Meta. And while normally we don't acknowledge the existence of ongoing investigations because it's been publicly disclosed by others, we also have an investigation against TikTok. Through that process, which has been going on for a long time, a couple of years probably, we have obtained a lot of information about the practices of social media companies. The focus of our lawsuits on Instagram. But of course, we just from using social media, you can see that some other social media companies use the same tricks. I'm going to list them because when I list them, there'll be, I should also just mention, because I do feel like it's relevant in this conversation. I graduated from high school in 1993. And I think this in between generation of like younger Gen X and older millennials are in this unique position to remember what it was like to be bored and to remember what it was like to have to call your parents on a payphone and all of that. But we also know how great it has been to have smartphones, to have social media. It's been great too. And I think that's important because I have observed that your generation really informs your perspective on social media and on smartphones in general. So I read things that I think are normalized now that I find disturbing. The amount of time spent on a cell phone I find disturbing. But the reason why we do that is they're designed to be addictive. And I wanted to list some of the tools. So the first is just the algorithm itself. It wants to recommend things to you that you want to see. And it tracks your data. One of the pieces of information that people don't realize is the reason why these social media apps are free is because they're not free. You're not paying money for them. You're paying your data for them. They collect your data, they share your data with advertisers, and that's how they make their living, by advertising. So the user, use social media as a social media experience, a tool to connect with your friends and family and acquaintances, but it's actually an advertising platform. The algorithmic recommendation system might seem like a good idea, and I experience it often as a good idea of like, I do like that blouse, how did you know? But for people who have, many of us, as not even people, I can't even say, it's all of us suffer in some ways. Because someone who has an eating disorder, for example, they're going to keep looking at certain material that might be harmful to them. And the algorithm doesn't discriminate. It doesn't pass a moral judgment or a health judgment on this might not be good for you. It just keeps showing that person the very thing that they probably shouldn't be looking at, because that's the thing they keep obsessively looking at. They want to keep us looped in so that more advertising dollars will be spent and they will make more money. That's only the first on my list, unfortunately. Sorry, I know you have a long list, so
No, this is helpful.
I don't need
Very
to
helpful. Thank you.
school this. The other one is infinite scroll. Infinite scroll is that look where you get a post that's like, here's your, nephew's birthday party, but underneath it, so temptingly, is that next post. And you don't know what it is. It looks like a mountain. It's my uncle. What's he up to? You can't resist. You have to scroll. And you just keep scrolling because there's something tempting you all the time that you want to look at. Excessive push notifications. This one doesn't resonate with me because I always turn off my notifications so I don't want to be bothered. Probably because I graduated from high school in 1993 and remember what it was like to not be bothered. I don't know. But that can also be a huge problem. It's distracting. It keeps you looking at your phone. I'm gonna lodge a complaint. My church stopped handing out programs when you got to church, and now you have to do a QR code on the hymnal. I'm like, I don't want to pick up my phone. I know. Now it's public that I said this and the minister's gonna see it, but I don't like it. I don't want to pick up my phone at church. It's like the one time I get to just let's be peaceful. The other one is like counts, and you can see on Instagram, like my niece, who's probably more savvy than I am with social media at age 19, has turned off her like I don't see how many people are liking things. That's helpful because that gives you a little dopamine burst. Actually, I think the Department of Health is testing, so they'll probably be able to
Not today.
what burst exactly
Yeah,
it is,
yeah.
but it's some sort of happy burst that you get when you see your like counts, and that can be addictive too. View counts with videos, that's the corollary. And then ephemeral content, that is content that disappears. So on Instagram, it's the stories, which only last for 24 hours. So you don't want to go 24 hours without looking at your stories because someone might post something. And then are you familiar with FOMO, fear of missing out? FOMO is a tool that's also used. It's like people don't want to miss out on the party or the who knows what. That's the, you know, it's taking our brains and all of their curiosity and wonder and taking advantage of it to make money for a company. The other thing is autoplay videos. So when you're scrolling and the video just starts playing and you don't even mean to be plugged in and interested, but now you are. So those are all the tricks that are used to keep us engaged in social media. Now, that's easy for me because social media came out when I was grown up. But I don't need to tell you because you're the education committee, but young brains are still growing. They haven't fully developed and they're very vulnerable to this kind of problem. And also, as we know from the tobacco companies, you know, if you can addict a person when they're young, then you have a customer for life. So that's a similar trick that's being used. Why is it, besides the time stuff, why is it bad for teenagers to be and students to be on social media too much? Well, it's because there are known negative outcomes for this. The evidence suggests that teen use of social media drives teen anxiety, depression, eating disorders, negative social comparison, suicidality, and self-harm and suicide. Very disturbing. We're not necessarily the experts on that, and I'm sure you'll hear more, but wanted to flag that it's certainly been a part of our lawsuit. And the thing about that I think about is there's two kinds of negative things going on. There's negative content. Well, there's the addiction itself, which is disturbing, but then there's negative content you might experience, which is like this example I gave you about someone who has an eating disorder. And then there's negative experiences. Negative experiences can be things like negative social comparison, which is really problematic, and driving some of the teen mental health crisis we're experiencing in this country. Unwanted sexual advances, sometimes from strangers, and other experiences like that that are more of an experience than a content. And negative social comparison, I just wanted to read you some statistics. This especially targets teen girls, but it's everyone. Meta had an internal study that they did, and it got leaked to the Wall Street Journal. So this comes from their own internal study. So I'm going to read some statistics from their own study about Instagram specifically. One of teens aged 13 to 17 who feel unattractive, 41% said the feeling started on Instagram. Of teens who felt they didn't have enough friends, 32 said the feeling started on Instagram. Teens who felt alone or lonely, 21% said the feeling started on Instagram. I'm going to skip, you can see the trend here, but I'm going to skip to these really devastating. Of teens who wanted to hurt themselves, 9% said the feeling started on Instagram. And of teens who wanted to kill themselves, 6% said the feeling started on Instagram. It's really upsetting. They have this information and they continue to create the product the way that they did. And teenagers are continuing to use the products the way that they are. And not just teenagers, unfortunately. You know, some of these social media platforms have an age restriction. They don't have meaningful checks to make sure that people who are not younger than that are using the product. So lots of problems. The body image problems, the negative social comparison is one of the most harmful effects of Instagram use. As I said, the algorithm is designed to show you more of the thing you keep looking at and doesn't make a judgment about whether that's good for you or bad for you. I wanted to also list a quote. The US Surgeon General recently put out like warnings about social media. And they had a quote I really liked. If we tell, I'm going to in brackets, an adolescent, we tell an adolescent, use the force of your willpower to control how much time you're spending on social media, you're pitting an adolescent against the world's greatest product designers. These are designed to be just the way they are. They're designed to be addictive. I kind of get worked up about this, so I'm gonna move on. We did sue Meta. One of the components of the lawsuit was a line I really liked, so I highlighted it literally with a highlighter. Teens talk of Instagram in terms of an addict's narrative, spending too much time indulging in a compulsive behavior that they know is negative but feel powerless to resist. And the part about that also is just stripping them of their innocence. They have a craving. It's just so if you feel helpless, but especially when you're an older person, you might not experience the same kind of interaction with your own social media accounts. But for young people whose brains haven't developed, they're very vulnerable to that. So I wanted to just turn a little bit to talk about data privacy as well. Now, you'll recall maybe 3 years ago, 2021, I want to say 2020, we passed HIPAA, the Student Online Privacy, I'm making it up, but you can get the drift. The focus, if I recall from that, is to have these like third-party education providers who are providing products not sell the students' data. I remember during a testimony in that one of the weak links was actually parents, and parents not realizing what the potential impact could be if they weren't strict about data privacy. So one thing I just wanted to float for you is the idea of rather than we think about financial literacy, what about like data privacy literacy to make sure that parents understand what some of the impacts could be on them not being strict with data privacy or not being careful. Your attorney general is very careful with her daughter's data. Usually when I'm filling out a form and they ask for information that I don't think they need, I just don't put it. I'm advocating for a bill, H121, that is a comprehensive data privacy bill, and it includes a data minimization provision. I'm a big proponent of data minimization just generally, but we can all employ that in our own lives. And I think that there's opportunities for data minimization when you're looking, because there's a lot in this bill that has to do with data, keeping in mind that that's how social media makes their money, is through our data. So if they didn't have our data, they're not going to be as successful at selling advertisements to us. But that's something that belongs to us, our data, we're giving it to them willingly now. So that's something to think about. One of the other pieces, I'm looking at the section 603. I, as a data privacy advocate, really liked this section, but I was gonna just note that, so I was especially looking at, so there's the opt-out policy, that people should be able to opt out. I also wanted to note that this is about, we already know that we should close any loopholes in SOPIPA. So SOPIPA deals, I didn't check the definition, but whatever the, third-party education entity would be, to make sure that, everyone is treated the same way. You should not be allowed to sell a student's data. It's their data, it belongs to them. No one should be making money off of our students' data, in my opinion. So I would just make sure there's no loopholes there and close them. Also, when we think about data, it's not just selling, it's not just having access to, it's the tracking, the destruction of the data, and the collection of the data to begin with. So I think that bears maybe some exploration about making sure that you're kind of checking all the boxes. Because it's not just having access, it's like, well, okay, what are they doing with it? How long are they holding onto it? You should probably, this is interacting with H121's data minimization provision, but there's a lot of questions about data that deserve exploring. And if you use your imagination and think about like, where does this go? What they take my data, what are they doing with it? I remember when we were advocating for SOPIPA, one of the topics that came up, I don't know if you remember, was the idea that if you track someone, say you got a bad test in second grade, and now you're kind of tracked. And we know that tracking used to be very popular when I was a kid, and generally, and now it's not. Kids change, kids go through a hard time, and then they get better. And it's kind of disturbing. We see that when we're getting advertised to on social media, and they're targeting you for certain ads. Well, what if they had information about you, about your, how you did on that test, and now you're getting a different kind of focus, or you're bad at math, and now they're not giving you the math content that you might enjoy, that would help you get better at math. So anyway, I'm kind of just using my imagination here, but I think that bears some exploration. It's important. Yeah. Okay, I think those are all the things I wanted to note. I'm happy to answer any questions. And I also just want to know, I mentioned in the beginning that we defend the state when the state is sued. Sometimes the state is sued because people don't like a bill that you passed and became law. And so, you know, sometimes I will reserve comment about any of the maybe potential items in a bill that could be you know, problematic down the road. And you guys are so early in this process, so I'm happy to come back if that ever comes up or if you want to talk about that. But for now, just generally speaking, wanted to give you the info that I had about social media and data privacy.
Perfect. Very helpful. Any questions? Please, Senator Weeks.
So I understand your hesitation about making a kind of expressing an opinion about whether the bill in general is, let's call it legal. And I'm wondering if you have any kind of comment or insight about whether potentially pulling a phone from a student on entry to a school and giving it back to them at the end of the day is, you know, is there fundamentally challenge with that?
You know,
Can you at least go there?
yeah, potentially, I would say, you know, we can unpack it a little more, but potentially,
So it's not a no, it's a needs analysis.
yeah.
Okay, that's fair. Okay.
Okay. Senator?
Not at this time, thank you. All right.
Thank you
So
very
much.
much. It's great having you in here, Attorney General, and we
Pleasure.
look forward to staying in contact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Thanks for making the time. I
All right,
really
yeah.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Nichols. It's great.
Good afternoon, everybody. How are you?
That's
Hi.
floor is yours.
Thank you. So just a couple of comments on what the Attorney General said, and then I'll share my prepared testimony. Our organizations all support big data advocacy concepts, you know, so we're fully supportive of the lawsuit, and the Attorney General brings up some really important points around protected student data. So we are all supportive of that. My testimony is going to be more about the practical applications for the fields that may impact this bill. And I did want to address the question, I think it was Senator Weeks that asked. Right now, in the law, I have the right as a school administrator, if I have a policy, to remove a phone from a student when they enter the school building to have them handed into me. Now, enforcing that, you know, can be tough, but the schools legally do have the right to do that. I think that was your question, right?
It was, thank you.
Our testimony. For the record, Jay Nichols, Executive Director of the Vermont Principals Association. In prep for testimony on this and related issues, the Vermont Principals Association conducted a survey to ascertain what current policies and procedures are in place for Vermont schools. We put out this quick survey, had over 100 responses from school leaders. There's a link, actually the link is right there, with a lot more information, including graphic charts for your review. Please take a look at the aggregate data when you get a chance, and don't focus too much on the comments, as only a small percentage of individuals actually left comments. I've also talked to teachers, curriculum specialists, technology integrationists, and other interested parties, including 3 legislators yesterday that actually approached me about this bill while I was over there. On January 19th, 2024, the Vermont Principals Association Executive Council discussed the issue of banning cell phones in schools. We didn't review this specific bill as we didn't know the tenets of it at that time. However, the conclusion of the Executive Council, who serves as a governing body and representatives of principals throughout the state, is clear. The VPA does not believe that banning cell phones outright in schools as a state law is the correct course of action. In Vermont, we have a long tradition of local control, in most cases having individuals closest to the local school making the decisions that impact that school and community is the best course of action. Some specific comments regarding various aspects of the bill. Mental health issues for students are a real crisis. Social media and technology are likely contributing factors in many cases. In fact, I think it's clear that they are. Already, most schools have social media and cell phone access completely or significantly restricted during the school day. Providing the mental health resources that students need when they need them is probably a better approach to addressing mental health needs in students than banning cell phones and social media from schools from our perspective. Every aspect of society uses social media as a communication tool and resource. Almost all schools use social media to reinforce information that goes out from schools to families and students in a quick, timely manner, robocalls to cell phones, automated text messaging, Facebook and Instagram postings, among many other social media communication tools, are used regularly by schools and are expected by our families and communities. Not allowing schools, school districts, and supervisory unions to communicate through social media is a non-starter for us. Our parents are used to this instant messaging communication format, and frankly, they expect it. Also, tools like the Google Classroom suite of products that are free for schools are used daily by tens of thousands of students and teachers in Vermont. Programs such as PowerSchool and Blackboard that allow parents and students to check grades and assignments in real time, as well as the Google platform, have become everyday tools in schools. To ban them would only hurt the progress of students who will be looking for jobs and pursuing higher education in our increasingly digital world. Our students need to be able to use digital devices. Allowing students to completely opt out of all digital device use is not part of what public education should be teaching in the current world. In fact, our students are required to take federally mandated assessments online, and many of our local assessment systems rely heavily on formative assessments that are digital in nature. I just want to mention here, Senator Gulick's literacy bill would require screeners. Those screeners are digital. Requiring schools to have paper copies for students in advance of instruction is a huge burden to schools, and it's not necessary. It's not appropriate to allow students to simply opt out of learning how to use technology in today's world. And the idea of separating students by whether or not they're allowed to use technology or not does not make sense in the inclusive classroom we strive to create. I apologize. In the modern school, educating students to become savvy and critical users and creators of digital tools to help them become informed and integrative, effective communicators and collaborators in our increasingly digital world is a key skill that our schools teach. Additionally, parents like the security they feel and the practicality and communication that they have when their students have access to cell phones before and after school. Schools can limit and fully restrict them during the school day, and many do. However, we believe completely banning them from school property before and after school by statutory decree is a bridge too far. Allowing students responsible use of cell phones or school-issued devices in some contexts also helps students develop essential skills such as digital literacy, responsible internet use, and understanding online etiquette. If these skills are not taught in school, then they are often likely not to be taught well. Recently, I talked to two different educators who utilize cell phones on a pretty regular basis, actually in their classrooms with students. One is a physics teacher who often has students use their cell phones during an experiment, recording the experiment, tracking data, linking resources, and actually sharing video productions of the process. Another is a physical education teacher who has students use a fitness tracker on their cell phones to encourage physical activity and movement. Now, many educators and many schools do not allow students to bring cell phones into the classroom or require students to turn them in at the beginning of the school day or in a given class. The VPA fully supports this, but again, believes this should be a local decision. Finally, in terms of the bill itself, we support any steps that the legislature, and perhaps more importantly, the U.S. Congress, can take in order to protect student privacy data from being used by corporations. We support any federal action in this regard, provided it does not impose more burdensome and unreasonable duties on our already overtaxed public school systems. We also support any legal efforts to end childhood exploitation that takes place through social media, obviously. In fact, oftentimes it is school officials that find out about childhood exploitation situations and notify local law enforcement and families. If necessary, we can bring in many principals and other school system personnel that can describe how some of the requirements of the bill are untenable and not appropriate for our current day public education delivery system. Please let us know if you'd like to do that, should this bill in its current form be given any real serious consideration. In conclusion, the VPA and its members are on the front line with the negative impacts of digital addiction and social media. Our members work every day with students and families affected by the related anxiety, depression, school refusal, and bullying that this technology contributes towards. Our membership and their school communities have been increasingly proactive in teaching about the risk and limiting or eliminating access during the school day, and we support the Attorney General's office class action lawsuit related to this concern. However, we do not support this bill as written for the reasons listed above. Thank you. Subject to any questions, and you have the survey there you can look at as well.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. One question. Sorry. Are there some schools that are doing this now that we could talk to? Did you say?
Yes.
Okay. Can you just?
That are banning it for during the day by policy?
Yeah.
Absolutely. A lot of them.
Okay. Great. Could you send us a couple of names to Morgan and me, and then we can just have them in to understand how it's going, some of the concern, things that are successful, et cetera.
Yeah, I can do that, Senator.
Thanks. Other questions, Senator Weeks?
Yeah. Jay, just a quick one, when you're done making your note.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just curious, if in your, it looks like you conducted kind of a brief survey of, principals and such. Were they asked if they thought that phones in schools were disruptive in general, besides the few, the physics teacher and phys ed teacher?
They think that just from conversations with principals at our drop-in meetings, there's overwhelming consideration that phones in schools in general are disruptive.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
It's kind of, I didn't pull that out of your clean it up.
Yeah, we didn't ask that specific question, but just during the drop-ins and stuff, we hear from members all the time what an issue it is. And, the other side of this issue is that even schools that try to ban it during the school day have lots of problems with enforcement and lots of problems with angry parents that are like, I want my kid to have their cell phone. So schools have had to stay strong on that. I think it's an enforcement issue. The bigger pushback that we've gotten, and our principals don't really know how to deal with this, is if my kid stays in after school program or goes to a sport event, and they get their phone with them to call their mom to come get them and those types of things. So we think it's better to leave it to the local school districts and let them say to the kids, hey, from 8 to 3, no phone. Or to say, you can use your phone in physics because Mr. Jones is allowing you to bring your phone to physics, no other class, or you can use them during lunchtime. And different schools have different policies, Senator.
Thanks.
So do you think that, we always hear about hazing, harassing and bullying? I've talked to a lot of educators and parents that think that cell phones being available, a lot of students' days get ruined because they get harassed over the internet.
They get harassed over the internet, but most of the time it's happening at home. So in the middle of the night, people are texting each other and saying nasty things, and then somebody brings it into the school and shows the screenshot to the principal, requiring an HHB investigation to open up because that's what the law says has to happen. But most of these events are not happening in school. And most schools that have one-to-one devices give the kids the device so they can check any of the device, and they tell them you can't have your phone out. Or you might be able to listen to your phone, like if you're, for example, full disclosure, I have a grandson who has a 504, and he has some teachers who will let him listen to his cell phone, listen to music, pod in one ear during like a writing class, because it supposedly helps him concentrate. I don't know if it's true or not, but that's what they seem to believe, and that's what he does. But typically, when we get these issues about harassing and bullying behavior through social media, happens at home when there's no supervision, or many cases there's no supervision happening, and that's where it tends to occur. Then it spills over into the school. And because it's affecting the school must investigate, even though it didn't happen at school. If it's affecting the education environment of a kid, then the school has to investigate it and take appropriate action.
Any other questions for Mr. Nichols? Thank you. Thanks, Jay. This is
Okay, I'll stay on till everybody's done in case you have any other questions.
the NDA could come for this. I don't think. Okay, could you check what did I get? Ms. Gillespie, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Sue Zaglaski, Executive Director for the Vermont School Boards Association. And first time that I was in here this session, I provided you with our legislative platform that has an explanation on the front about our resolutions process at the Vermont School Boards Association. That is how we develop our legislative positions. And unfortunately, we don't have a resolution on this topic. So because of that, I called a meeting of the legislative committee so they could take a look at the bill and provide me with some direction on how to testify on the bill. So they actually met yesterday morning, and based on that meeting, providing you with this testimony, that the VSBA, of course, believes that schools should be safe places for all students, so that they can learn. And we understand the challenges that we face as we continue to think about how to integrate technology into education in a way that is safe and healthy for students. We share your concern about the use of cell phones in schools and the negative effects of social media on youth mental health and well-being. However, our members feel strongly that the use of cell phones and social media during the school day should be left to the schools to manage, and that a statewide ban would be difficult to enforce. The SBA is concerned about the electronic device, internet use, and digital and online opt-out section of the bill. First, we would like to better understand the problem that this section of the bill is trying to fix. The misuse of student data is currently addressed through state and federal student privacy and cybersecurity laws and regulations. And we don't understand how the optional opt-out provision provides additional protections against the misuse of student data. We are also extremely concerned about the creation of a private right of action if a school district fails to comply. And finally, we believe that technology literacy is a critical 21st century skill and are concerned that students who opt out will not develop these necessary skills, thereby widening the digital divide and leaving some of our students behind. And that concludes my testimony.
So Gillespie, if you have a sense of the percentage of school boards that have moved in the direction of not allowing phones, this kind of technology in districts.
I don't have that data, but I know it probably is quite consistent with what Mr. Nichols was testifying about, and it sounded like his survey of the principals identified that it's quite prevalent.
Love to get the percentage at some point. I don't know if there's a way for, and we can check with, I think the school board is the best way to do it. I'm guessing if there's a way for you to just find out if it's 10% of the school boards, 20%. It doesn't have to be exact, just something, you know.
We could try to do a survey and
That'd be great.
of school board chairs,
Great. Yeah.
hopefully get a good response.
Yeah, thanks, even if it's rough. Ms. or Senator Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, thank you for your testimony. I know we don't, the VSBA does not have a resolution currently on the books. Has it ever gone up for a vote at the VSBA, do you know?
No, at least not during my time, which is 6 years with the association. But certainly, sometimes when a bill gets attention like this one, then, you know, the next time we go through our resolutions process, a board will put forth the resolution. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that happen.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Myers, you're the last, we've already heard from the Attorney General. Floor is yours.
Thank you. For the record, Chelsea Myers, I'm the Associate Executive Director at the Vermont Superintendent Association. And I do have a little bit of rough data that maybe fulfills what you were just asking for, but nothing formal. So thank you for inviting testimony from the Vermont Superintendents Association on F-284. Mental health and data privacy are extremely important to both schools and society. In fact, VSA has identified mental health as one of the top priorities for advocacy and is eager to collaborate statewide on solutions to help support the well-being of all Vermont students. With that said, in speaking to close to 50 superintendents at an association meeting yesterday, not one superintendent was supportive of the bill as written. The following points were raised by superintendents in response to the legislation. All of the students that I spoke with yesterday, representing approximately 50 school districts or SUs, indicated that their school districts have limitations on students' access to cell phones. In some instances, students are required to turn off their phones for the entire day. In other cases, cell phone use is allowed very narrowly with specified limitations, such as at lunch only. Technology in schools is essential for fostering a dynamic and interactive learning environment, enhancing students' digital literacy. Technology facilitates personalized learning experiences, catering to individual learning needs and interests, ultimately preparing students for success in the technologically driven world they will navigate beyond the classroom. The third point, social media serves as a powerful tool for community engagement with schools. Through popular social media platforms, schools can share achievements, events, and important updates, creating a dynamic narrative that showcases the district's story and reaches a broader audience. Though schools can and do use other communication channels, by using social media, they are able to reach a broader audience, meeting community members where they are at. 4, superintendents at the meeting shared their social media use policies, procedures, and handbook language for students and staff. VSA has provided training on this topic in past years. If it's helpful for me to share any of that language in the social media policies and handbooks, I'd be happy to do so. An opt-out policy as outlined in the bill would have significant implications for how schools function. Schools rely on technology for testing, communication, feedback, personalized learning, literacy and math skill development, foreign language support, and so much more. If just one student were to opt out partially or fully, educators would be required to create a parallel track to learning absent of technology each day, significantly increasing the workload of educators or requiring additional staff at a time when budgets are under tremendous pressure. The bill says schools shall not penalize or withhold an educational benefit from a student who opts out of any program or activity. In some cases, there is no non-technological equivalent to the experience and depth technology can provide. If a teacher were to opt out and provide a fully non-digital curriculum, groups of students would not be afforded the same learning opportunities that prepare them for the digital world that we live in today as their peers that are in a classroom with a teacher that has not opted out. Encouraging responsible use of electronic devices in schools allows students to develop essential digital skills for the modern world. In the words of one superintendent, this is the world now. It is our job to prepare them for it. Schools are embedding responsible use instruction throughout the learning experience. There are a number of resources available to support this work. For example, from the International Society for Technology and Education. Additional high-quality training and resources could be beneficial to the field. Finally, around data privacy. Data privacy poses a concern for all of society. Efforts to ameliorate data privacy concerns should focus on requirements for the organizations who collect and utilize the data, particularly around the collection and utilization of data from minors. Superintendents prioritize the safety and privacy of students every day. In speaking with a technology director, she provided me with the following examples and resources of how districts protect student data privacy. Vermont is a member of the Student Data Privacy Consortium and has its own data privacy agreement, modeled after the national version that districts use. Instead of relying on a vendor or platform's privacy policy in terms of service, which are always subject to change, vendors sign data privacy agreements from the district. This outlines that they can and what they can and can't do with the data, especially that of students. And then I provide an example of a protocol for requesting new technology and some of the data privacy agreements that might be offered at the school level, or I'm sorry, between a vendor and the school district. Here's an example also of a student data privacy page. It's linked in the digital testimony on a district website that outlines the steps they take to protect students, pertinent laws, and additional resources. It's beyond my level of expertise, but I think the links provided provide a pretty good overview of what schools are thinking about, the relevant laws, and what they're providing to communities and families around data privacy. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Ms. Myers. Any questions for Chelsea on her testimony?
Well,
Yeah, please.
I'll ask for
Yeah.
that. So thank you, Chelsea. We're taking up a data privacy bill in health and welfare. As always happens, we seem to be, moving in lockstep with Senate education. But one of the things that we were talking about today is the privacy of the apps on the phone. So it's not necessarily the software that's being used in school for educational purposes, but the software on the smartphones. And I'm assuming, are there any protections that schools can offer around that? I know Peter's here. Were you planning on talking today?
Is this why you're here, Peter?
What?
Why are you here?
For this bill?
To just witness, or we don't have you on the agenda?
You're not, right, you're right.
Okay.
Not on the,
I'm just curious about protections, specifically to the cell phone in terms of data and privacy while someone is in the district, in the building. We talked about geofencing too.
Peter, why don't you come up and have a seat and introduce yourself?
Can I ask you, Chelsea, one
Yeah,
question?
please.
So did you record that? We were on Teams or Zoom yesterday when you had 50 superintendents and none of them supported this bill?
Did you record that? Is that
Did you record it?
meeting recorded for people to
No,
watch?
we were in person for that meeting. So our attendance was about either a superintendent or assistant superintendent of about 50 districts were represented in that space. And then we asked very specifically if they had a policy procedure, some kind of written form of restriction on cell phone use in schools. So no, it's not recorded as a formal survey or anything like that at this time.
You said all 50 did not support it.
There were only 50 there, so out of the 57 districts that we represent, and out of everyone in the room, no one supported the bill as written.
Thank you.
I'll just mention, Chelsea, one thing that the Attorney General mentioned, and I've heard, I think she was sort of referencing it, is the grading system sometimes. Do you know anything about, in other words, if you've ever participated in Google Classrooms, or if you're listing grades, or if you're having an online campus, like class chat, for example, the assignment could be respond to, this prompt. Do you know if there are protections around those kinds of things? Just kind of thinking, the Attorney General said that it can grab your B+ in algebra or your D- in algebra, how that might impact things in the future for you.
I do not know the specificity of that question, but Peter might know more than I do.
Peter, it is nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
If you want to introduce yourself for the record and give us some thoughts on.
Okay, yes, my name is Peter Drescher. I'm the Director of Technology at Essex Western School District. I'm here today also in a role as Vice President of VitaLearn, which is the professional development entity for technology educators in the state.
Peter, you had a long career at DE as well.
I did. I worked there for 12 years. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Please.
So I'm here in opposition to the bill as it is. I will not refute some of the things that have already been said or repeat them.
Yeah.
I may emphasize them a little bit. But I'm more here to talk about the practicality of this and some of the pieces in the bill. I think that it is, while we do not disagree with the intent, or there's certainly like student, taking care of student mental health, those things, I think these are all things that my constituency believes in and we try to do every day. There's a few things that I want to talk about. The one thing the AG brought up and also Chelsea brought up as well is the Student Data Privacy Consortium that many of the districts are involved in. This is something that began back when I was at the Agency of Education. Had a hand in bringing that to the state. That was something that we do require all of our vendors. They sign a policy that lets us dictate what kind of data they take. And we are now working, most of the districts in the state now work with an entity that helps us kind of manage that. There's thousands of vendors in there. So anytime the school district takes on a new tool or, product or something like that. At our district, we require that if a teacher is asking for a piece of software or tool, the requirement is that they sign the agreement. As you can imagine, when we were early doing this, we had many that pushed back and things like that, but they've seen the writing on the wall. And we now have, they quickly come to the fore with an agreement on that. So that's something that we are doing in the school district. And I would surmise, of those 50 superintendents that Chelsea was talking to yesterday, most all of them have that in place at their district. It's something, there's an annual fee for it, but it helps us manage those contracts. So that's really good there. I just want to get to the practical thing of like how this would look at a classroom.
Sure.
And there's some language in there talking about, the student who opts out, the teacher who opts out. How is that going to be possible? You're essentially getting into a situation where you're segmenting students in that classroom. And then there's a piece lower in the bill that talked about the distraction piece and having it so they can't even see the technology. I'm just not sure how you would practically do that in the classroom. I think yesterday, I was watching a video yesterday of your test or your session last Friday, and it was talking about, the impact of funding being minimal. I don't agree with that. This is going to be very expensive to implement, to have, I don't know, somebody used the term, Chelsea or Jay, parallel tracks of instruction in a classroom with technology and then with the students that have opted out. So on a practical side, I just don't see how that's possible.
Tell me what you like about them. Is there anything in there, anything sort of nugget or any information that we need going forward that we could, we like find a little success, you know, so we like to see if there's some kind of common ground. Is there something that you could see us working on or information going forward?
Yeah, you know, certainly the piece about working on, you know, and we've talked about it. Jay mentioned it,
Yeah.
Kelsey mentioned it, I think Sue mentioned it as well. You know, a lot of districts have something they're doing with cell phone policies, those kind of things. There's a whole side of that we need to address. It's the parent side of this. You know, parents are sending students to school with a cell phone.
Mhm.
We're not requiring that. They're coming with a cell phone. That could be something parents talk about. So there's those pieces to it. I think also, and I don't want to get into the word mandate because I don't think it's there, but helping schools understand the you know, the benefit of having some kind of statewide curriculum from digital citizenship, internet safety, something that everyone's using, something that we can be, you know, we can be collaborating and working together on. We don't have that across the state. Everyone uses different tools. There's a lot of them out there. I think that would be, you know, that would be a great step in a good direction to do that.
Great, Senator.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Peter. Sorry I put you on the spot, but
Oh,
it's good to
it's-
hear from you. You echoed something that I was definitely sensing as I was reading this bill, which was that this bill would require a lot more staffing and
Yes.
because there's no way you can do what is outlined in the bill without adding more staff to schools. And we know that feels like an impossibility right now. And staffing, of course, would mean more money, which also seems untenable right now. I'm just gonna throw that out. I thought it was so interesting that you brought up statewide curriculum. I love hearing that. Because so much of the testimony is local control. So anyway, someday I want to have a broader discussion about what the strategic plan is for education in Vermont that seems to be lacking right now, mission, vision. But I love that we could all sort of get on the same page in at least some areas.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Senator.
So, thanks for your testimony.
Sure.
Are there any financial benefits to using some electronic devices that are being used in the Vermont classrooms? In other words, do they pay the school somehow? And I'm asking because I don't know. Do they give you equipment to use? Do they pay
Good
to test it?
question.
You mean as far as like giving us some incentive for using a product or something like that? I'm not sure. That would be, that might be a relationship that's had between the school district and the product vendor.
So there's no uniformity within the agency of education that says,
Well, I'm not in the interested because.
Okay, I know.
Yeah, okay.
but
Um,
I'm just thinking that you sound like you would know if there was.
Maybe I'm missing what might be possible here.
You see a school saying, hey,
Or I'm really saying it's
500
gonna cost.
here are 500 cell phones, try them out, anything like that. This is a new technology, give it a shot, anything like.
That kind of stuff happens often. I'll answer that from a perspective of
Yeah.
a technology director. I don't like that because that's a come on that has during COVID.
Yeah.
That happened all the time with the vendors reaching out directly to teachers to give here's the free software for 6 months. From our perspective, we know that the teacher starts using that software. After 6 months, they don't want to stop using that software. So now we have to pay for it. So, I mean, I'm not sure the word incentive is what you meant, but I mean, that's more of it depends on the relationship.
Great. Thank you, Peter, for jumping in. We have to leave it there, but we're gonna take 5 minutes before Scott Giles comes in. And we will pick up this conversation after talking with Senator Williams, the sponsor.